Alright, today we are going to be working on the cylinder mount in OnShape. I know this is AutoCAD, but this is essentially our basic drawing here. And this is what it looks like in OnShape when it is complete. So we've got some various features here. We've got a square base, 4 mounting holes. We have the rectangular support structure to hold the cylindrical portion. And then we have the cylindrical portion itself with a 3/4 inch hole bored through it. Let's take a look at our drawing. So the square base is 3 inches by 3 inches by 3/4 inch tall. So that's where we'll start. So let's jump into a new document here. Alright, so like I said, we're going to start with the base. We'll do a new sketch right on the top plane. And we're just going to draw a square, and we'll dimension it 3 inches by 3 inches. And then I like to keep things centered up, so we're going to dimension off the center point to the edge, half of 3, which is 1.5. And we'll do the same thing from here to here as well. Alright, we will finish that sketch and rotate it, and we will extrude it. It can go up, that's fine. 3/4 inch. Alright, our base is done. So again, that's the base, and we got our 3/4 inch measurement there, our 3 inch measurement there, and our 3 inch measurement there. Next, we want to do the rectangular support structure here. Now, one thing to note is while this is centered up left to right across our base, it is not centered up front to back. So we need to take note of this dimension, this 1.25 inch dimension here from the front edge to the front edge of the rectangular support. And the rectangular support is 5/8 inch thick, or in depth. And then we need to figure out how wide this rectangular support is. There's no direct measurement on here. However, if we look at the diameter of this outer circle, we can understand that since these two lines are tangent to that outer circle, that means that the distance from here to here is equal to the diameter of the circle. So that's 1 7/8. So we're going to make a rectangle that is 1 7/8 by 5/8 inch, positioned left to right symmetrically on center, and then front to back 1 1/4. Alright, so let's draw that. Start here, new sketch. Draw another rectangle. This is going to be, like we said, 1 7/8, so that's 1.875. And then the thickness was 5/8 inch, so 0.625. Okay, and then our distance from here to the front was going to be 1.25. We want to center this up. Now, there's a few ways we can do that. Knowing that the total width of our square base here is 3 inches, we can actually do some basic math. So what we'll do is we'll actually have the dimension kind of calculate things out for us. Oop, that's not what I wanted to do. That dimension can actually get deleted. Select it and delete it. There we go. So we want to go from this edge to our left edge here. You could do the same thing over here. It doesn't matter either side because they're going to be the same measurement anyway. And so what we're going to do is we're going to open up some parentheses here. 2 sets of parentheses. So we have 3, which is our total width, minus 1.875, which is the width of our rectangle right here. Close one set of parentheses. So now what that is doing is it's basically telling the software, hey, we need to calculate what's the number for this total amount remaining outside of our rectangle here, but still on the square base. However, we want the same amount on both sides, and right now we're just dimensioning one side. So we need half of that amount. So we're going to tell it divided by 2, and then close the parentheses again and hit enter. And we see we get just over ½ inch. And we will accept that. Now we need to extrude that up. So we need to figure out how tall is this thing going to be. So if we look in this view, one thing I suggest is that if you have dimensions, start working through your dimensions one at a time. So we know our diameter, that's not really going to impact the height because it's up some amount from here. It's not like it's tangent to the base here. So we can discount that. This is a hole. This is the thickness of the base. That doesn't really impact it. None of these dimensions really have any impact other than this one here, where it's showing from the base to the center line of our circle part here is 1 1/8. So we're going to extrude that rectangle up 1 1/8 of an inch. So we will click there. We will click on our rectangle. Make sure it says add. And it's going to be 1 1/8, so 1.125. And we will let that extrude out. All right, next we want to do our cylindrical portion. So that is going to be 3/4 of an inch in depth, and then the 1 7/8 in diameter. Really simple to draw. We don't even need to dimension this. We're going to draw right on the face of this rectangular portion here. So, our new rectangle, that's where our sketch is. And we're going to draw a circle. We're going to go right over this line, hover over it until we find the center point. And we go right to the edge. Done. So that drawing is done. Now we have two profiles here, so you have to make sure we select both when we go to extrude it. So we'll click extrude. We'll select the bottom portion and the top portion so that we get one solid piece here. And we want to go 0.75. And let's take a look at what we're getting here because we're running into a problem. So there's two issues here. Number one, we don't have a drawing plane that's right down the center of mass of this support. So we can't do like a symmetric extrusion. If we flip this to symmetric, you see we're not covering the entire support structure here. And if we look at this, we can kind of glean that, we've got a little bit overhanging on one edge and a little bit overhanging on the other edge. So let's calculate out what that needs to be because we do need to look at the numbers here. So if our support structure is 5/8 of an inch and our cylinder portion is 3/4 of an inch, that means that there's a difference of 1/8 of an inch between the two. And again, if we want these two to be symmetric, which we can assume because there's no dimension that tells us otherwise, then we want 1/2 of 1/8 here and 1/2 of 1/8 here. So that's 1/16 of an inch here and 1/16 of an inch here. Let's go back to our part here. Well, very obviously we don't have 1/16 of an inch on the right side. And if we look at, if we assume that our drawing plane is here, we have 1/2 of 3/4, which is 3/8 on this side, so that's way too much. So let's flip back to blind. I just want to show you some options that we have here. One is second end position. So you can see that actually starts going the other direction, but now we have two measurements that I can input. So what if I put 1/16 here? Let's see what that gives us. And you may need to experiment with this. If you drew this on the other side, that's okay. Just play around with it and get it right. So we've got our 1/16 now, but our total needs to be 3/4 of an inch. So if I type in 3/4 here, we'll see that actually kind of messes it up. It's not symmetric. It's a little bit hard to see in this view. Let's look normal to it. Okay. So we know that this is right because we just entered the number straight up right there. So then this looks approximately double that. So it looks like we need to take our 1/16 off of our 3/4 of an inch. So if we have 3/4, how many sixteenths is that? Well, that's 12/16. And then we're going to subtract 1, so that leaves us with 11/16. So we can just type that in, 11/16. You'll see now suddenly this looks nice and symmetric. And we've got our 1/16 overhang on each side. Very good. Hard part's done. All right, so we've got our basic structure here. Now let's take a look at what else we have to do. We've got a few rounds and fillets, so it looks like all the corners are radiused at 1/4 inch on the base. Then we have a fillet that goes all the way around the support structure at 1/8 of an inch in radius. And then we'll do the holes next. So let's do our fillets. Let's do the outside corners of the base first. So we'll click on the fillet tool, set it to 1/4 of an inch. We'll just click on all the vertical lines. Again, be very careful that you're selecting just the vertical lines and not a whole surface. Our result needs to be something like that, where all 4 corners are rounded out. I like that. And then let's do the fillet around the support structure here. So let's click on fillet, and we're going to set it to, like we said, 1/8 of an inch this time, so a little different. And we'll click all 4 edges as we go around here. Looks good. All right. And now we want to start putting holes in this thing. So we know one hole goes right in the center of this, so let's just put a new sketch here. And I don't even think we need to look normal to it. We're just going to put a point. So we'll hover over the edge so that we get that kind of highlighted. And we wait until we get our center point, so it's going to be a square with the outside circle highlighted. Okay, and we'll finish that sketch, and then we're going to use the hole tool. We'll select that. Now, how big does that hole need to be? That hole is going to be 3/4 of an inch, according to this. So we can tell it 0.75. And we like that, so that looks good. And now, last but not least, we're going to put our 4 mounting holes in this. Let's just look at where they need to go. These 4 mounting holes are all 1/2 inch in from each corner. So if we look here, the center points of our holes are 1/2 inch. And then what is the size of the holes? The size of the holes, 3/8 of an inch. We have 4 of them. Okay. So what I mean by 1/2 inch in from the corners, I'll show you. We'll select here, put a point. Now what I want to do is kind of hover over and keep tracking my previous point as I go around this and do all 4 of these. The reason why is these kind of link together nicely, and as you'll see, it's gonna kind of save us some dimensioning as we go. One thing we don't want to do is accidentally put it in the center of the radius. We don't want that to lock in. All right, so now let's dimension our points here. Again, we said they're all going to be 1/2 inch away from the edge. Now, if this happens, it's no big deal. We're just going to click and drag these kind of back onto here. It'll sort of fix itself as we go. You can see these are linked together now, so it kind of makes life a little bit easier. We'll do that. And from here to here is also 0.5. All right, so just by putting these 4 dimensions on, I've actually dimensioned all 4 of these holes, versus if I didn't have them linked together, I'd have to dimension all 4 of them separately, so I would need 8 total dimensions instead of 4. So it saves us a smidge of time. Again, with larger grid patterns, this might be, if I had 16 holes to do, this might be much more efficient. All right, and then we're going to put our 3/8 inch holes where these points are. So let's get the hole tool going. We will select all 4 of our points here. All right, and then we want to change our size, 0.375. There we go. And that is the completed cylinder mount.